So have you ever sat at a dinner table and you notice that you're having a conversation with someone and you notice that they have a piece of like broccoli or something stuck in their teeth, right? And no matter how bad you try to ignore it, it's like there. It's like exclamation points, like boom, like you can't. You try to ignore it. You try to be polite, but finally you just say, "Excuse me, but you have a piece of broccoli in your teeth." And I can think of a few times that I was the one that had something caught in between my teeth, and it's a bit embarrassing, but you simply say, "Thank you for telling me," because you want to know, right? And then you attempt to fix the problem, you ask if it's gone, and then you resume your conversation. But what if the person that's telling you this eats with their mouth open, right? So you want to reply snidely back to them. You want to say, "Well, I wish you'd eat with your mouth closed," right? That's what it happens sometimes. We're human beings, right? But this is a little different scenario from what Jesus said in the 7th chapter of Matthew. As we continue on this Sermon of the Mount that we started many weeks ago, we are now into chapter 7, and beginning at chapter 7, verses 1 through 6, which has far greater consequences. And there he asks us a question we need to know the answer to. It's a life principle that dives deep under the skin. It's a challenge, a line Jesus drew in the sand. If we, his church and his children, are to effectively influence the world we are called to minister to. If we are to have any hope of fixing this mess that we're in. See, America is in much need of revival. The world is in need of revival. I'm in need of revival. And the church is certainly in need of revival. See, what hinders this work the church is commissioned to do more than any other is that we have broccoli in our teeth. Or Jesus said it better this way, and let's turn to our scripture reading this morning, taken from Matthew 7, verses 1 through 6. I believe it's in your bulletin. It's in the bulletin. Thank you, Sherry. Yes, there it is. Thank you. Okay, and if you don't have a bulletin handy and you want to use the Pew Bible, please do so, or any electronic device that you wish. Judge not, that you be not judged. And with that judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how could you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, the plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First, remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. See, we want to be told if there's something embarrassing about our appearance. Food in our teeth, a bra strap showing, a zipper down, a hair out of place. But most of us are willing to tell a friend if something is embarrassingly out of place before they would be seen in or by the public. But Jesus is dealing here with something of much more greater importance than aesthetics and impressions. He's talking about not just knowing the difference between right and wrong, but doing what is right because seeing the right and seeing the wrong and choosing the right is what matters if we are to be effective in helping anyone else and working out our own salvation. So let's backtrack a minute. Let's look at verses 1 and 2. In our degraded society that America is today, a Christian can hardly make a statement concerning morality in public without someone standing up and screaming, "Don't judge me." Then that sinner goes on to partially quote probably the only Bible verse they know. "Judge not, lest ye be judged." They hold on to this verse so they can shout down the voice of believers so that they will never be reminded of their own sins. And it has worked very well. Christians unilaterally give up ground because they don't want to appear intolerant and because they don't really understand the verse that was just thrown in their face in the wrong context. So what does the Christian need to understand about judging? First, realize that there is only one righteous judge. Verses 1 and 2, do not judge so that you will not be judged, for in the way you judge, you will be judged. And by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Anytime you see a bold Christian make a moral stand, Christians scream out, Christians are never to judge. And their tactic has been effective in silencing Christians to the point where they are nothing but weak. God never intended us to be silenced concerning society's morality. God never intended for His word to be watered down or degraded. This verse is one of the most misunderstood in the Bible. The Bible is not saying that we should never judge. Jesus is making a point to self-righteous people about their motive in judging and their own moral ability. Pharisees were self-righteous and judged people without mercy. Jesus is forbidding unwarranted condemnation of other people. His warning is that if you judge people without mercy, then God will judge you without mercy. If you love to participate in gossip and slander and tearing other people down, ripping them from every little fault that you can find, then realize this: God's going to tear your world apart as well. Number 2, realize our own sin before judging others. Verses 3 through 5, why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and behold, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly. Just take the speck out of your brother's eye. Here, Jesus reveals that most people that harshly judge others overlook the enormous level of sins in their own life. We're all sinners. It's true. I might not like to hear that, but it's true. We're all sinners. Does this mean that we are never to judge? No. Jesus commands us to judge. And what does this mean? We should judge our own behaviors first and diligently work at fixing others instead of judging without mercy. Number 3, realize the responsibility to judge properly. How do you judge properly? Judge with mercy, coming from our own humility. Verse 5 again, you hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. We must be right with God instead of condemning others for not being right. We must realize our own sinfulness and not be self-righteous. Our motive must be to help the other person, not tear them down. David was a great example about this. He, in Psalm 51, verses 10 through 13, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain in me with a willing spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will be converted to you. Notice David is repentant concerning his own sin and mindful of his great failures. His desire is to help others come to know God, find forgiveness, and be saved. If your practice of judging others is to tear others down instead of helping others, like David, well, then you're more like the Pharisee or the hypocrite. Judge rightly and boldly to protect your church and family. Verse 6, do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Here's some observations on that. How does that pertain to your family? You do have the responsibility to judge the actions of your children, but also the responsibility to live as a moral example before them. You do have the responsibility to determine who your children and spouse can be friends with and what they say and what they do, but how does this pertain to the church? Dogs and swine, stray dogs and pigs were considered dirty, filthy, wild, and unholy. Church has the responsibility to address the moral behavior of the individual members when it affects the church. Church has responsibility to address members who are wild, in other words, that cause division, arguing, and unruly behavior. And finally, number 4, realize that we are commanded to judge. Commanded to judge. Matthew 7, verses 15 through 20. Beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles, are they? So every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then you will know them by their fruits. There are different kinds of trees. Trees will produce good or bad fruit, and you will know them by their fruit. What do you have to do in order to know them by their fruit? You have to examine the fruit. You have to judge if the fruit is good or bad. And why is this important? To protect the church from heresy and false prophets that seek to get rich and powerful by manipulating believers. One of my jobs as a deacon here at this church is to teach the truth and to lead by example. But every pastor, every teacher, every deacon, and other leader must also do the same. And there you have it. The world says, don't judge me, but Jesus commands us to judge, but we must judge with humility and mercy. We must judge to build up instead of to tear down. We must judge to protect our church and our family, and we must rightly and realize that God must judge us in the same manners as we judge others. We're critical by nature, aren't we? That reminds me of a man who, whenever he would bring a prospective wife home, his mother would criticize her unmercifully. Feeling exasperated, one of his buddies gave him some advice. He said, "Find someone just like your mother." So he looked and he looked until he found someone like his mom. The young woman looked like her, walked like her, talked like her, and even thought like his mother. So he took her home. Well, the next time he saw his buddy, his friend asked how his mother liked the girl, and he answered, "Oh, it went great. My mother loved her, but my father couldn't stand her." We're just critical by nature. It's just the way we are. But Jesus goes for the jugular of their judgmentalism when he asks a follow-up question in verse 4. Or how can you say to your brother, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," and then there's a log in your own eye? I like what the author Erwin Lutzer says about the man with the beam in his eye. He is incapable of seeing his own plank because that plank developed over a period of time. It was little specks of sawdust that were not confessed and attitudes that were not dealt with. And so they grow, and he begins to develop a critical, judgmental spirit. Have you ever noticed when you're driving, the side mirror that you have, your side mirror, it says, objects in mirror are closer than they appear? This safety warning is required to be engraved in the side mirrors of every vehicle sold in America. We should have something similar imprinted on our souls. Your sin is closer than it appears. Here's an application. Every time you're driving and you look in the mirror, ask yourself if there's a sin you need to confess. Keep your eyes on the road, though, okay? But still, yes, when I was preparing the sermon, I've actually really kept an eye on that little note on my mirror that you very rarely notice. So here's some reasons why we must avoid critical judgmentalism. We don't know all the facts. Proverbs 18:13, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. An owner of a warehouse decided to make a surprise tour to make sure that all his employees were working hard. He immediately noticed a young guy lazily leaning up against some packing crates with his hands in his pockets, doing nothing. The owner got angry and asked him, "How much are you paid a week?" The young man's eyes grew really big and he said, "Well, $300. So the owner pulled out his wallet, peeled off 3 $100 bills, gave him the cash and said, "Here's a week's pay. Now get out of here and don't ever come back." So without a word, the guy stuffed the money into his pocket and he took off. Now the warehouse manager was standing nearby, staring in amazement. The owner walked over to him and said, "Tell me, how long has this guy been working for us?" And the manager replies, "He doesn't work here. He's just delivering a pizza." So we really don't know the whole story when we're being critically judgmental. You don't know someone's motives. It's impossible to know another person's heart, especially when we don't even know what lurks in our own hearts. 1 Corinthians 4:5 is a powerful corrective. Therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness and will disclose the purposes of the heart. Then each one will receive his condemnation from God. We must distinguish between biblical issues and personal preferences. There are some things that are always wrong, and there are some things that are always right, but there are other issues where there is freedom, provided we are not causing our brother to stumble. The early church had a lot of tension about eating meat sacrificed to idols. Romans 14:3, let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. Unfortunately, it's often in the realm of freedom that people express their strongest judgments. I came across a story of a man who was off on a weekend. So he visited a large church with some relatives. He started judging things as soon as he pulled into the parking lot. He liked some things and didn't like a bunch of other things. And when he walked into the auditorium and found his seat, which was very comfortable, and he liked that, but the band was playing a song he never heard before, so he didn't like that. The service started and the band began playing another song that he didn't know, so he started getting angry and even more judgmental. As he stumbled around in the valley of pride and frustration, he noticed that his 10-year-old niece, Michaela, who had been in a long battle with cancer, was twirling around directly in front of him. She had a scarf, and she was flinging it around as she closed her eyes and expressed her jubilation to Jesus. He was convicted by his smug arrogance and started weeping. He then looked and noticed that his daughter, Lydia, who was standing right next to Michaela, had a very serious and contemplative look on her face. He was rebuked a second time because he found out later that it was during this time of praise that God confirmed to her what it is that she would be doing for the rest of her life. She is now certified as a child life specialist so she can care for kids with cancer. And now her and her husband have been blessed with a child who has a genetic disorder and needs special care. And while he was presumptuously judging, they were praising Jesus. We're all sinners. We're all sinners. And unfortunately, some of us think our sins smell better than other people's sins. So it's easy to gloss over our sins while gossiping about the grossness of someone else's sin. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Christians are better off, but not better than anyone else. We must guard against seeking revenge. It's easy to get worked up and take things out on people, isn't it? I'm reminded of what James and John asked Jesus to do in Luke 9:54. Lord, do you want us to tell the fire to come down from heaven and consume them? They hated the Samaritans, and they wanted to wipe them out. What we read in verse 55 is Jesus is he returned to them and rebuked them. We will all face God in judgment. James 4:12 asks a probing question. There is only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? He's God and we're not. And frankly, he doesn't need our help in running the world. And so, we're to avoid critical judgmentalism. Let's look at the second part now while embracing careful judgment. Embrace careful judgment. We're called to be wise and discerning in two ways. Humbly help others. It's not wrong to see a speck in someone's eye. What's wrong is that we exhibit hypercritical and hypocritical judgmentalism. Notice what Jesus says in verse 5. You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Before we can remove the beam, we have to recognize that we have one. We must detect a problem before we can correct the problem. And by the way, one way you can tell that you still have some judgmentalism going on is that you become more enraged at someone else's sin than you are embarrassed and convicted by your own. After we do some self-surgery by confessing our own sins, then we're called to humbly help others. When I deal severely with my own sin, I'll be more sensitive and careful to help others with those who are stuck in sin. After David confesses his sin and asks God for a clean heart, he makes a request in Psalm 51, verse 13. Then I will teach transgressors their ways, and sinners will return to you. Galatians 6:1, brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual shall restore them in a spirit of gentleness, a spirit of meekness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. It's true that we must not judge a book by its cover, but we can judge a book by its contents. John 7:24, do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. To simply magnify the sin of others is wrong. When we deal with our own sins, we can do the gentle and careful work of helping get something out of someone else's eye. And the person will often be glad for the help because he knows we are not there to condemn, but to help. Decide to be discerning. While we're not to be involved in critical judgmentalism, we must make wise judgments. We see this in verse 6. Do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. Dogs and hogs were unclean animals known for their ferocity when provoked. They symbolize those who scorn and mock truth. Don't think of dogs as the domesticated pets that we have, but rather like wolves or rats. There's no way someone would take what's left from a holy sacrifice in the temple and feed it to a mangy mutt. Pigs were the epitome of uncleanliness for the Jews. Pearls were invaluable in that culture, even more precious than diamonds. Jesus is saying that we must be careful to not give something priceless to someone who is just out to attack you. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 22 puts it like this: the dog returns to his own vomit, and the sow, after washing herself, returns to wallow in the mire. Proverbs 14:7 says, leave the presence of a fool, for there you do not meet words of knowledge. Jesus practiced this when he answered Pilate's question, but stood silent when before Herod. Here's what I've learned today, and I hope you have too. To avoid critical judgmentalism while embracing careful judgment, we're going to bless our neighbors. We need to bless our neighbors. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to judge our neighbors or coworkers or classmates? Proverbs 11:9 and verse 12 say, with his mouth the godless man would destroy his neighbor, but by knowledge the righteous are delivered. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. Instead of blasting our neighbors, let's look for ways to bless them this summer. You know me and my acronyms. I'm going to give you another acronym here. The word bless, okay, as you consider to live on this mission going forward. B, begin with prayer. Simply ask, God, how do you want me to bless the people in the places you've sent me to? L, listen. Take the time to listen to the people around you. E, eat. My favorite. Look for ways to have a meal or dessert with your neighbors. S, serve. Observe the needs and then respond accordingly. And the final S is story. Everybody's got a story. When the time is right, share the story of how Jesus has changed your life. And finally, as always, with every lesson, look to the cross. The only way to get rid of hypercritical and hypocritical spirit of judgmentalism is to consider the cross. In order to get rid of the beam, recognize that Jesus took the judgment we deserved when he was nailed to the crossbeam. It is impossible for us to look at the cross and be self-righteous and critical at the very same time. I'm reminded of the scene in John 8 when the religious leaders expressed their judgmentalism by bringing to Jesus a woman caught in adultery. Jesus first deals with the sin in their own hearts by inviting those without sin to cast the first stone. When they all walk away, Jesus gives her grace when he says in verse 11, neither do I condemn you. But he doesn't stop there, does he? Nope. He then speaks truth when he says, go, and from now on, sin no more. The author Tim Keller writes, when we define and describe sin to postmodern people, we must do so in a way that challenges not only prostitutes but Pharisees and others to change. If you're busted by the boomerang and the beam, believe in and receive Jesus Christ, who took on all the judgment you deserve, and go and sin no more. Will you join me in prayer this morning? Dear Heavenly and Merciful Father, we just thank you for so many things. Today we are asking for discernment and the courage to judge our brothers and sisters with mercy, with tenderness, with grace. Our concerns are that we may need your guidance to recognize the plank in our own eye first. Help us with this and all things that bring you glory. We ask this. We ask for all good things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.